So I'm gonna ad-lib this. What are we talking about today? We're talking about Atlantis and Ireland. So the myth of the city of Atlantis, it's probably taken more minds and inspired more poems and stories and fanciful programs than any other myth in the ancient world. And for good reason. It sort of paints this picture that there was an area in the sea, in the Atlantic Sea, the home of Eden, where there was always good and no bad, and everything was free of evil and sickness, and it was a high civilization who really extended their power across the seas. So I've been thinking about this for quite some time, reading into the original Atlantis story. It obviously comes from Plato, the Greek philosopher, and his writings called Timaeus and Critias. So, and just a bit of background, I've been studying early Ireland and the archaeology of early and prehistoric Ireland for a good 4 years now. But anyway, this is just a bit of a rant because I'll say it here that I don't think the Atlantis story is factual. What I think is that when Plato's writing about Atlantis, he's loosely basing his information on events that really occurred, and perhaps consciously or unconsciously he's basing his information on the prehistory, archaeological history of Ireland. So, well, let's just go into the flood myth. So we have great flood myths from early medieval times in Ireland. So the Irish legends that were written down between roughly 680 to 1200 AD, they talked about Ireland being peopled by groups of 6 people. The first was the race of Cessair, then it was Nemed, then it was the Firbug, the Tuatha, and then the Milesians. But anyhow, the first two, or the race of Cessair, it was 300 men, 300 women, and 3 men, and they all died in a great flood, and Ireland was depopulated for a few hundred years because of the calamity. Now the Tuatha, this mystical spirits, they also descend from the sky in their boats, so that's another relationship to the sea. And Ireland does have history of massive coastal change, and there were floods. I mean, I know Graham Hancock likes to talk about Atlantis, and he likes to talk about the last ice age 11,500 years ago. I don't believe that really for a sec. I don't think records or oral history could go back that far. And yes, that would have caused some calamities. However, there's something far closer to Ireland and Western Europe, and that's called the Storega landslide. Now the Storega landslide, it's located off the coast of Norway, just west of the coast of Norway, and basically in the Phoenix Park, and basically a massive continental shelf, basically a mass of rock underwater displaced and shifted. But the mass of rock was essentially the area of modern day England and Wales. So imagine that quantity of stone displacing underwater. This was around 6500 BC. So imagine that quantity of water displacing underwater. It created an enormous tsunami, an absolutely enormous tsunami, 15 meters in parts. It flooded Doggerland, which was the area between the land bridge that was between Britain and the Netherlands, and it also impacted Ireland because Ireland at this time would have had occupants known as the Mesolithic peoples, and they would have been living on the coasts. So there is flood history in Ireland, absolutely there's flood history in Ireland. And the thing about the coasts changing is that after the Storega landslide, and with the moving of the coasts, if you think about Aran Islands, in the Mesolithic period in Ireland, you could walk by foot over sandbanks from Doolin Bay in County Sligo all the way to the Aran Islands, and it's mad that you could walk that by hand. So first of all, there is evidence for flood history in Ireland. That's number one. There's a lot else he says about. There's a lot else that Plato mentions in Timaeus and Critias. The other thing that he mentions is that he first of all mentions the geography of Ireland, or not the geography. He mentions the geography of Atlantis. Number one, it's an island. That's obviously Ireland. Could also be Britain, but then he says, which is really important to differentiate the two, then he says that the land is flat from east to west. You can walk from east to west, and it is surrounded by mountains. So that matches pretty much exactly the geographical landscape of Ireland. We pretty much have a flat plain from east to west, running from Louth, Dublin, all the way to Galway. And then you go south, north, you have Antrim Mountains, Donegal Mountains, and then south you've got the Kerry and Cork Mountains. That's two, that matches up Ireland. He then says that a couple of hundred stadia, he also mentions that the city of Atlantis is X stadia long and X stadia wide. This was analysed by the Doctor of Geography in Sweden, in Uppsala University. Ulf Erlingsson is a name, and he said that matches one for one the dimensions of Ireland. So that's two, that's number two. Number three, he mentions that there is a temple dedicated to Apollo. Now, we all know about Ireland, that we have the famous Boyne Valley Passage tombs, and we know from prehistoric times that they were visited by residents of Ireland, and they would deposit coins as tokens of gratitude, or perhaps they were ritual deposits, offerings to the gods. So that's number three. So he says that there's a temple of Apollo situated by the river. So that's number three. Number four, he mentions that the Atlanteans are great seafarers, and this is absolutely no doubt, like in terms of Irish early history and prehistory, there is no doubt that the Irish were capable of long seafaring journeys. There's been naval connections running from Ireland up to the Faroes, Shetland, Scotland, down south into Brittany and the west coast of Iberia, and we even have material culture like the Barbary ape skull that was found in Navanfort in Armagh, and that was traced to the north, or basically to the North Africa or the Mediterranean. So that's number four. He also mentions curiously that Atlantis is ruled by these 10 twin kings. This sort of was a little bit odd for me when I first read it. At least I didn't know what he understood, but then it sort of dawned on me that this could actually be a sort of early history of the Irish kingdoms, because we have 5 provinces in Ireland. The word for a province in Ireland is Cuaga. So you have Cuaga Lion, Cuaga Mumu, Cuaga Connacht, Cuaga Ullad, agus Cuaga Meaja. Meath, Leinster, Ulster, Connacht, Munster. Now, in these kingdoms we had provincial kings reigning, but oftentimes you had what was called a lethri, or a twin king. Now, leth is an old Irish word. It's usually used for like leth hule, so dual eye. I mean, as in a pair of eyes, or leth lov, a pair of hands. So when he's saying it's ruled by 10 kings, I mean, this could have easily been skewed from that there were 5 provincial kingdoms in Ireland and 2 kings were ruling at the same time. There's other information that he mentions in Timaeus and Critias. he also mentions that there's these great stones, and I think this is the real crux of the argument here, that when the Irish encountered these great passage tombs in Meath and in Galway at Knock passage tombs, that they mythologized these tombs and said that they were residents of the gods. So I think what really could be happening is that somehow Plato was encountering early Irish historians or early Irish map makers, and he's sort of loosely basing his story on the history of Ireland. I think it's a very convincing case. This is just a walk and talk video. I'll have to sort of edit this a little bit more in depth. I'll have to edit more in depth and go onto the computer and show you all the images. But absolutely, I don't think the Atlantis story is true. I don't think Plato's story in Timaeus and Critias is factual. I think he's loosely basing his writings on actual events though. And Greeks and Romans did have a knowledge of Ireland in the prehistoric Iron Age period. They absolutely did. So it's not inconceivable to imagine that Plato somehow got information from nearby peoples and loosely based the events around Ireland. So that's it for this video. I've been talking for 12 minutes. I will put together a more in-depth video about Atlantis in Ireland. It does deserve to be discussed. And yeah, I mean, Atlantis, it's this sort of Garden of Eden, this never ever land where nobody ages, and people, who was a beautiful king and that was submerged by the sea. I mean, and Plato also says that it's situated out west in the Atlantic. So considering that it was situated out west in the Atlantic, we do have early legends like Bran and the Voyage of Bran, where a fairy woman calls to Bran and beckons him out west into the sea, where there's thrice 50 islands awaiting him and beautiful maidens housed in each. So yeah, I'll do more on this video. It'd be good to, you know what I'll actually do, I'll go into the Timaeus and Critias writings and I'll do footnotes. I think that's probably the best way to situate this academically. So yeah, I'll footnote the Timaeus and Critias and I'll upload that online, share it around on your man Graham Hancock's page, etc, etc. So yeah, that's all I have for now. That's all that came out of my head. Thanks everybody for watching. Smisha, Kaelon, Bulfin, Umyahar, August Hamisha, Egg, Tort, Slan, Div, Anish. So see you next time.